What would you do if the life you destroyed returned to shatter yours? Imagine this. You're on top of the world, in the most exclusive restaurant in New York City, celebrating your latest victory with your new conquest. You feel invincible. But suddenly, across the room, amidst the clinking of glasses and hushed laughter, you see her. Your ex-wife, Sarah, radiant, pregnant, and dining with Elias Sterling, a mogul so powerful he could wipe you off the map with a snap of his fingers. In that instant, everything you thought you'd won crumbles. The price of your betrayal isn't money. It's the life you ruined, now flourishing without you. Tonight is about to become a judgment. Before we dive into this tale of betrayal and billion-dollar revenge, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. What's the biggest betrayal you've ever witnessed in a business deal? The restaurant, the Zenith, was less a place to eat and more a declaration of status. It soared on the 60th floor of a glass and steel needle piercing the Manhattan sky, a silent testament to the gods of finance and influence. Alexander Alex Thorne felt at home here. The hushed reverence, the tinkling of Christoffel silver against Bernadotte china, the panoramic view of the city, glittering like a scattered rug of diamonds. It was the native tongue of his success. Beside him, Jocelyn. Joss Day was the perfect accessory. Her crimson dress clung to a figure sculpted by discipline and ambition. Her laugh was a practiced melody, light and effervescent, designed to charm, not to challenge. She touched his arm. Her nails painted the same shade as her dress. "You seem distracted, darling?" she purred, her voice a soft rumble. Did the deal hit a snag? "The deal," Alex said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, was a masterpiece. He had just closed the acquisition of a smaller tech firm, a ruthless yet brilliant maneuver that would net him millions and make headlines in the Wall Street Journal. Tonight was meant to be the celebration, the validation. He raised his glass of Macallan 20 to masterpieces, Joss toasted with her champagne flute, and to the artist. As their glasses touched, Alex's gaze drifted. It was a habit he couldn't break, scanning a room for threats, for opportunities, for he never expected to find her. Not here, not now. But there she was, Dr. Serafina Sarah Ellis, his Sarah, his ex-wife. She was seated at a corner table, the most coveted in the restaurant, framed by the sparkling constellation of the city below. The soft lighting caught the delicate curve of her cheek, the elegant line of her neck. She wore a simple yet stunning sapphire blue dress that draped beautifully over her figure. A figure that was, unmistakably, pregnant. The air rushed out of Alex's lungs in a silent, violent gasp. Pregnant. The word detonated in his mind, shattering the calm, sterile environment he had so carefully constructed for himself. The whiskey turned to acid in his stomach. He remembered their last conversation, a shouting match in his minimalist penthouse, where he'd called her dream of a family a chain, and her work as a pediatrician an unprofitable hobby. He had thrown away a life with her for this, for Joss, for the thrill of the new, the easy, the adoring. And Sarah was not alone. Seated opposite her was Elias Sterling. If Alex was a prince of the city's financial scene, Elias was its reigning king. Older, with a quiet intensity that unnerved even the most arrogant traders. Sterling ran a private equity firm that could swallow Alex's entire company without so much as a burp. His reputation was mythical, part Warren Buffett, part ghost. He rarely appeared in public, and when he did, it was with purpose. He was leaning forward, listening to Sarah with a look of focus so deep and gentle that Alex's blood ran cold. He wasn't looking at her like a business associate. He was looking at her as if she were the only person in the universe. He reached a hand across the table, covering hers. It was a simple, unadorned gesture of intimacy, a gesture Alex hadn't deserved, and therefore had lost. Do you think Alex deserves the life he built? Or is this glimpse of Sarah's new life the karma he earned? Share your thoughts below. Alex, are you all right? Joss's voice cut through his paralysis. She followed his gaze. Her perfectly made-up face tightened. The painted smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Oh, the single word laced with a poisonous mix of surprise and satisfaction. This was the ghost she had always been competing with. And now, here she was. Real, vulnerable, and with another man. Alex felt a primal surge of possessiveness, so potent and irrational it terrified him. That was his wife. That should have been his child, his legacy. He had told himself he didn't want it, that he was free. But seeing it, seeing her, given over to another man, a better man, a more powerful man, felt like a physical blow. Suddenly, Sarah looked up, as if she could feel the weight of his stare. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, met his across the room. There was no hatred in them, no anger, just a flash of something that was infinitely worse. Recognition, followed by a silent, weary dismissal. She held his gaze for a heartbeat, a universe of shared memories passing between them. Late-night talks, lazy Sunday mornings, a shared grief over a miscarriage they never spoke of again. And then she turned back to Elias, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips as she resumed her conversation. She had erased him. In that single, elegant turn, she had reduced him and his whole carefully curated life to background noise, an unimportant shadow on the periphery of her radiant new world. "We're leaving," Alex growled, his voice low. He threw a few $100 bills onto the table, not even looking at the check. "But we just got here," Joss protested, her voice acquiring a whiny tone he was beginning to despise. "I thought we were celebrating." "The celebration is over." He stood up, his chair scraping harshly across the polished floor, the sound of violation of the room's sacred silence. He did not look back at Sarah's table. He couldn't. The sight of her quiet happiness was a mirror reflecting his own profound emptiness, and the image was more than he could bear. He had won the world. But at that moment, looking out at the city he had conquered, Alex Thorne had never felt so bankrupt. And leaving the Zenith felt like fleeing the scene of a crime. If you are gripped by this story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The cold night air hit Alex like a slap, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled perfection of the restaurant. He strode past the waiting town cars. He needed to walk. He needed the brutalist architecture of Midtown NYC to match the jagged edges of his thoughts. "What was that all about?" Joss demanded, her heels clicking rapidly on the pavement as she struggled to keep up. The practiced charm was gone, replaced by raw, undisguised frustration. "What do you think it was?" Alex snapped back, his voice tight. "So you saw your ex? Big deal. She's moved on. Isn't that what you wanted?" Joss's words were meant to be reassuring, but they sounded like an accusation. "You got what you wanted. So why are you acting like this?" Because he hadn't wanted this. He wanted Sarah to be miserable. He wanted her waiting by the phone, longing, regretting her decision to finally draw a line. He didn't want to see her flourishing, pregnant and beautiful, on the arm of a man like Elias Sterling. He wanted to win the breakup, and he had just discovered, in the most public and humiliating way possible, that he had lost. "It's not about her moving on," he lied, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's about Sterling, Elias Sterling. Dining with him isn't casual, it's a power move." It was a weak deflection, but it was all he had. Joss seized on it. A power move? Against you? Alex, don't be paranoid. She's a pediatrician, not a corporate spy. But was she? His mind, trained to see angles and leverage in everything, started spinning. Elias Sterling was not known for sentimentality. Every move he made was calculated. What if this wasn't a coincidence? What if Sarah, scorned and furious, had sought out the only man in NYC who could truly hurt him? The idea was terrifying, and, in a twisted way, flattering. It meant he still mattered. He recalled the final months of their marriage. It wasn't just the arguments about a family. It was the silences. It was the way Sarah looked at him when he came home late, smelling of expensive perfume and moral compromise. He had been working on the Beaumont deal, a hostile takeover that was legally gray and ethically black. He had bent rules, exploited loopholes, and ruined a small, family-run competitor to pull it off. He had told himself it was just business. Sarah had seen the papers he carelessly left on his home office desk. She had a mind as sharp as any lawyer, and an even sharper conscience. "This is not just business, Alex," she had said. Her voice trembled with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "You have a document outlining the pension fund you plan to dissolve. It's people's lives, their retirement. You can't just erase it. It's a liability on the balance sheet, Sarah. It's what you have to do to make the company viable. You don't understand." He had been dismissive, arrogant. "No," she had whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I understand perfectly. The man I married never would have done this." That was the real beginning of the end. The affair with Joss had only been the final, clumsy, brutal act. He'd sought out Joss because she didn't challenge him. She applauded him. She saw his ruthlessness not as a moral failing, but as a sign of strength. She was drawn to the same thing that repelled Sarah. He had built his new life on that foundation, an architecture of lies, he told himself, that he was stronger without Sarah's moral compass, freer without her expectations. Now, seeing her with Sterling, the entire edifice threatened to collapse. "I'm going to the office," he said abruptly, hailing a cab. "The office? It's nearly midnight." Joss's voice was incredulous. "Alex, this is our night." He turned to look at her, the streetlights casting harsh shadows on his face. "There is no our night right now. I have work to do." He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, quickly masked by anger. For a moment, he felt a pang of something. Not guilt, but a weary recognition of the pattern. He was doing it again, pushing away intimacy for the cold comfort of work and control. He climbed into the cab without another word, leaving her standing alone on the sidewalk, a beautiful statue of his own bad decisions. As the cab pulled away, he watched her shrinking figure in the rearview mirror. He had chosen her for her simplicity, for her lack of judgment. But now, all he could see was the emptiness of it all. She was a reflection of his desires, not a partner in his life. The real partner, the one who saw all of him and tried to call him to be better, was now carrying another man's child. The file, the Beaumont file, felt like a relic from another life. Alex slammed it onto the polished mahogany of his boardroom table. The office, usually his sanctuary, felt like a cage. The panoramic city view, once a symbol of his dominion, now seemed to mock him, every light a reminder of a life happening without him. He had come here to work, to bury himself in the cold, hard logic of numbers and contracts. It was his coping mechanism, but he couldn't focus. The image of Sarah's serene face was etched in his mind, and the quiet, proprietary gaze of Elias Sterling. He checked every article, every financial statement, every rumor he could find on Sterling Investments. Elias was a ghost, just as the rumors claimed. He invested in stable, long-term growth sectors, renewable energy, biotech, logistics. His portfolio was the antithesis of Alex's high-risk, high-reward, scorched-earth tactics. Sterling built things. Alex tore them down and sold the pieces. There was nothing that connected Sterling to Sarah, nothing to suggest this was a targeted attack. It only made it worse. It meant their meeting was organic. It meant Elias Sterling was interested in Sarah for who she was. His phone buzzed. It was Joss. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, he picked up. "What?" "I'm outside your building," she hissed. Her voice was no longer whiny. It was cold, hard steel. "Let me up. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "Don't you dare hang up on me, Alex," she snapped. "I am not a disposable toy you can walk away from when you're moody. I gave up my life for you. The least you can do is face me. Or are you going to hide in your tower all night, brooding?" The accusation hit home. He was hiding. With a sigh of resignation, he let her up. When Joss walked into the boardroom, she looked different. The party girl veneer was gone. She had scrubbed off her heavy makeup and her hair was pulled back. She looked tired, but resolute. She wasn't here for an apology. She was here for a reckoning. "What do you want, Joss?" he asked, turning to look out the window, unable to face her. "I want to know what this is," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "What we are. Because tonight, you looked at her, and it was as if I wasn't even there. I've spent the better part of a year bolstering your ego, telling you you made the right choice, that I'm more exciting, more ambitious, more whatever you needed to hear." She took a deep breath. "And in 1 second, she undoes it all, just by sitting in a room." "It's complicated," he mumbled. "No, it's not," she countered, stepping closer. "It's simple. You never got over her. You didn't leave her for me. You used me to leave her. There's a difference." The truth of her words was a physical shock. He had never thought of it that way. But she was right. Joss hadn't been the prize. She had been the weapon, the tool he used to finally cut the cord with Sarah, a cord he hadn't been strong enough to cut himself. "And what's worse," Joss continued, her voice dropping, "is that I let you. I told myself that eventually you'd fall in love with me, that once the dust settled, you'd see what you had right in front of you." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "I guess I'm just as foolish as you." Alex finally turned to look at her. He saw for the first time not the mistress, not the accessory, but a woman who had made a desperate gamble and lost. There was a glint of something in her eyes, not just pain, but a deep, calculating intelligence he had always underestimated. "What about the Beaumont deal?" she asked abruptly. The change of subject startled him. "What about it? You told me it was your masterpiece." "You told me it was all above board," she said, her eyes narrowed. "But I've heard things, rumors on the street, that you buried documents, that you leaned on the board, that the only reason it went through was because you hid the long-term pension liabilities from the shareholders." Alex froze. "Where did you hear that?" "I have my sources," she said vaguely. "Is it true, Alex?" It was the same accusation Sarah had made, only this time, it didn't come from a place of moral outrage. It came from a place of cold, hard leverage. "That's a dangerous rumor," he said, his voice low and threatening. "The truth is more dangerous," Joss countered. She walked to the boardroom table and picked up the Beaumont file. She held it as if weighing it. "I always wondered what she had that I didn't. Now I know. A conscience, and as it turns out, a backbone." She looked from the file to him, and a slow, chilling smile spread across her face. "You're worried about Elias Sterling coming after your company. Maybe you should worry more about the people already on the inside." Before he could process the implication, she dropped the file back onto the table. "I'm done, Alex. Done being your placeholder. Done waiting for you to see me. I'm going to find a life where I'm the main event, not the distraction." She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous room. The click of the door closing was as final as a gunshot. Alex stood alone, the silence ringing in his ears. He had walked out on Joss tonight, and she had just walked out on him forever. But she had left behind a grenade. Maybe you should worry more about the people already on the inside. His blood ran cold. Had Joss been collecting information? Was her question about the Beaumont deal a threat? He had seen her as simple, as adoration personified. He had been a fool. He had underestimated everyone. Sarah, Elias, and now, most dangerously, the woman who had shared his bed for the last year. The facade of his perfect, controlled world was cracking, and he had the terrifying sense that the entire structure was about to collapse. The next morning, Alex's office felt less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night oscillating between fury and a sharp fear. Joss's final dart had destabilized him more than the sight of Sarah and Elias. It was a threat from the inside, the kind he couldn't easily defend against. He called his security chief, a former military intelligence officer named Marcus, and gave a quiet, concise order. "I want a full investigation into Jocelyn Day. Everything. Who she talks to, where her money comes from, every digital footprint she has. And be discreet." Then he turned his attention back to Elias Sterling. If this was a coordinated attack, he needed to find the link. He dug deeper than the public portfolio, into the man's history, and that's when he found it. A single, obscure business article from the early 1990s. The article detailed the collapse of a small, innovative logistics company, Sterling Logistics. It had been driven into bankruptcy after a relentless, hostile takeover by Thorne Global, spearheaded by its legendary, feared founder, Victor Thorne, Alex's father. The CEO of Sterling Logistics had been a young, ambitious man named Daniel Sterling, Elias's father. The air in the room grew dense. This wasn't business. This was a blood feud. Victor Thorne had been a titan, a man who viewed business as war and mercy as a fatal flaw. Alex had spent his whole life trying to live up to his father's impossible standards, adopting his ruthlessness without ever possessing his genius. The ghost of his father haunted the boardroom, a constant, silent judge of Alex's every move. The Beaumont deal was exactly the kind of brutal, efficient play his father would have applauded. Now it appeared the ghosts of his father's wars were returning to torment him. Elias Sterling wasn't just any rival. He was the son of a man his father had destroyed, and he was just seen dining with the one person who held the key to Alex's own ethical compromises, Sarah. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. The sequence of events was too perfect. Sarah, hurt and angry after their divorce, armed with knowledge of the Beaumont deal's irregularities. Elias Sterling, harboring a decades-long grudge, looking for a weakness in the Thorne empire. Had they met by chance, or had Sterling sought her out? His private line buzzed. The caller ID read, E. Sterling. Alex stared at it for a long moment before answering. He had nothing left to lose. "Hello, Elias." "Alex." Sterling's voice was cold and calm, no hint of gloating. "I imagine you're having a difficult morning." "You did this," Alex gasped. "You and her. You set me up." "You set yourself up, Alex," Elias corrected gently. "Your father built an empire on scorched earth, and you tried to do the same. But the world has changed. Men like you, men like your father, have become dinosaurs." Do you think Elias's willingness to help Sarah, despite his own revenge plot, shows he is a better man than Alex? Or is he just a more sophisticated player? "I'm not the asteroid. I'm just a man who believes in building things instead of breaking them," Elias said. "I called for two reasons. First, As a professional courtesy, my firm will be making a public tender offer for Thorn Global stock this afternoon. At the fire sale price it will be trading at, I expect we'll have a majority stake by the end of the week. My first act as chairman will be to fully reinstate the Beaumont Pension Fund. The humiliation was absolute. Sterling wasn't just taking his company, he was sanctifying it, cleansing it of Alex's sins. And the second reason? Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah, Elias said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. She had nothing to do with this. She knew nothing about the article, nothing about the whistleblower. The truth is, I did seek her out initially. Your father took everything from my family. I won't lie and say the idea of revenge wasn't appealing. I thought she might be a weapon I could use against you. He paused. But then I met her, and I realized she wasn't a weapon. She is a brilliant, kind, resilient woman who deserved better than to be a pawn in my game or a victim in yours. My feelings for her became very real, very quickly. This, what happened today, was set in motion long before I met her. But now I ask you, man to man, leave her out of this. Do not drag her into your mess. Do not contact her. Do not blame her. She has suffered enough from the Thorn name. Let her have her peace. It was the ultimate defeat. His rival had not only beaten him in business, but had proven himself to be a better man. He had seen Sarah for who she was, while Alex had only seen her as an extension of himself. She's carrying your child, isn't she? Alex asked, the question tasting like ash. There was a long silence on the other end. No, Elias said finally, his voice quiet. She's not. The baby is yours, Alex. From a final, desperate attempt at reconciliation a few weeks before the divorce was final. She was going to tell you, but then she found out about Joss for certain. She decided she would rather raise the child alone than with a man she could no longer respect. The world tilted on its axis. The air left Alex's lungs. His child, not Elias's. His, the legacy he thought he'd forfeited, the life he had thrown away. It was his all along. She does not want you in her life, Alex. Elias's voice was firm, but not cruel. But that child deserves a father. Whether you can become a man worthy of that title, well, that's up to you. Goodbye. The line went dead. Alex slammed the phone down, his hand shaking. He sat in the echoing silence, the city glittering unaware outside his window. He had lost his company, his reputation, his mistress, and the woman he now realized he had always loved. But in the smoking wreckage of his life, a single, terrifying, sacred truth remained. He was going to be a father. His redemption, if it was possible at all, would not be found in a boardroom or a balance sheet. It would be found in the quiet, immense, terrifying challenge of earning his way back, not to Sarah's life, but to the life of the child he never knew he had. The war was over. The surrender had just begun. 3 months later, Alex sat in a sterile waiting room. It wasn't a lawyer's office or a corporate HQ. It was a neutral mediation center, chosen by Sarah's lawyer. The walls were a soothing, anonymous beige. The art was bland and inoffensive. It was a room designed for truces and treaties. The door opened, and she walked in. Sarah was further along now, her belly a beautiful, proud curve beneath a simple gray sweater. Her face was devoid of makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired, but serene. She was alone. No Elias, no lawyers. She sat in the chair opposite him, the table between them feeling like a vast, empty chasm. "My lawyer advised against this," she said, her voice even. "But I needed to do it, for me, and for this boy." She placed a protective hand on her stomach. "Sarah, he began. the 1,000 apologies he'd rehearsed dying on his lips. They all sounded pathetic, inadequate. "Before you say anything," she cut him off, raising a hand. "I'm not here for an apology. I've read about what you've done, cooperating with the SEC, setting up a full restitution fund for the Beaumont employees out of your own pocket. I'm not saying it absolves you, but it's a start." He just nodded, unable to speak. "I'm here to set terms, Alex," she said, her voice gaining strength. "This is our child, and I won't deny her a father. But your fatherhood will be on my terms. There will be a trust administered by a neutral third party for the child's expenses. You will have no direct financial control. You will have visitation rights, starting small, supervised, and only if you continue your therapy and stick to this new path. You will never speak ill of Elias, who has been a pillar for me, and you will never, ever make this child feel like a pawn in some game between us. Your role is simple, to be a father. Nothing more." It was a complete surrender, and it was more than he deserved. "It's fine," he whispered, the word choked with unshed tears. "It's fine, Sarah, whatever you say." She looked surprised by his immediate capitulation. She had clearly come prepared for a fight, for the old Alex to emerge. Seeing this broken, humble version of him seemed to disarm her. For the first time, a flicker of something other than anger or pity crossed her face. It was a ghost of the old warmth, a flash of the woman who had once loved the man he was supposed to have been. "Why, Alex?" she asked, her voice softening. "Why did you do it all? The lies, the affair, the business? Why?" He looked at her, and for the first time he told her the absolute, unvarnished truth. "Because I was a coward," he said, his voice breaking. "I was terrified of failing to be the man you deserved, the husband, the father. I was terrified of being like him." He vaguely gestured to the ghost of his own father. "So, instead of trying and failing, I ran away. I blew it all up on purpose, because burning it down felt more powerful than admitting I was afraid. I chose Joss because she didn't ask me to be better. She only asked me to be rich. It was easier. It was the most cowardly thing I have ever done in my life, and I'm so deeply sorry, Sarah. Not just for hurting you, but for not being brave enough to love you correctly." Sarah watched him, her own eyes glistening. She didn't reach out. She didn't offer empty words of comfort. She simply sat there and bore witness to his confession, giving him the dignity of her attention. She stood up slowly. "The baby is a girl," she said softly. "I'm due in 6 weeks. My lawyer will be in touch with yours to finalize the paperwork." She turned and walked to the door. Before she left, she paused, her hand on the handle. "Goodbye, Alex." He watched her go. The word goodbye echoed in the silent room. It wasn't the ending he would have written. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no promise of a second chance. Their love story was over. But as he sat there, stripped of his pride and his empire, he realized this wasn't an end. It was a beginning, the start of a long, difficult road to become a man his daughter might, someday, be proud of. He had lost the world, but he had been given a chance to save a small piece of his own soul. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Can a man truly change, or are we destined to repeat the sins of our fathers? What does it truly mean to pay for your own mistakes? This story is a testament to the fact that our greatest failures can sometimes lead to our deepest beginnings. The path to becoming a worthy father will be long and arduous for Alex, a silent battle fought away from the headlines. Hit the like button, share this video, and tell us in the comments. Do you believe Alex Thorne can truly be redeemed? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next captivating drama. The quiet that followed the mediation was terrifying. It wasn't the empty silence of the penthouse anymore. It was a vast, heavy quiet filled with the weight of responsibility and the knowledge of his failure. Alex moved out of the city and into a temporary, modest apartment near the firm managing the Beaumont Restitution Fund. He worked relentlessly, not on acquisitions, but on full disclosure with the SEC, facing the inevitable criminal charges with a calm he hadn't possessed in years. He spent hours in therapy, systematically dismantling the coward he had become. The man who equated love with loss of control. His entire world was now structured around the terms Sarah had dictated. The Child Support Trust was fully funded and secured by third-party management. He even hired a former pediatric nurse as a consultant to prepare him for the basics of infant care. He knew he couldn't contact Sarah, and the silence was a constant, sharp reminder of his absolute isolation. Then, 6 weeks after their last meeting, the call came from Sarah's attorney. "Mr. Thorne, you have a daughter, Aurora Ellis. She arrived this morning. Both mother and child are stable. Your visit will be scheduled through the social worker, strictly adhering to the terms and bounds outlined in the mediation agreement." Alex hung up the phone. The name Aurora, meaning dawn, ringing in his ears. A new beginning. He had a daughter. He hadn't been there for the labor. He couldn't see her now. And the profound joy was mixed with an equally profound, aching guilt. He wasn't allowed to send flowers or gifts. He wasn't allowed to call the hospital. He waited 4 agonizing days until the social worker, Ms. Evelyn Reed, no relation to Joss, contacted him. "Your first visit will be tomorrow morning at the Neutral Visitation Center. It will last 1 hour and must be fully supervised. Mr. Sterling will be present." Ms. Reed's voice was warm but professional, setting the clear boundaries. He spent the night practicing holding and swaddling a weighted baby doll, his hands, once used to gripping power, now meticulously trying to master gentleness. Mike's. Meeting Aurora. The 60-minute dawn. The visitation center was a small, brightly lit room with soft toys and primary colors, a stark contrast to the dark wood and marble of Alex's former life. When the door opened, his breath caught. Sarah walked in, her face pale with recovery, but imbued with a quiet, fierce strength. She held a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft white blanket. Aurora. Beside Sarah stood Elias Sterling. Elias nodded to Alex, a respectful, non-hostile acknowledgement that clearly stated, "I am here to ensure the terms are met, nothing more." Alex's eyes were fixed entirely on the baby. She was tiny, impossibly fragile, with a shock of dark hair and large, serious eyes that were a deep, unreadable blue-gray, a perfect blend of his and Sarah's colors. Ms. Reed directed the interaction. "Mr. Thorne, you may sit. Sarah, you can hand the baby to him now." Sarah hesitated for a split second, a flicker of fear in her eyes, before she placed the baby in his arms. The weight of Aurora was less than he expected, but the impact was seismic. She was warm, solid, and utterly real. Alex felt the world narrow down to the soft fabric of her blanket and the sound of her small, even breaths. He looked at her face, the perfect miniature features, the little downturned lips. He looked at her hands, so tiny, gripping nothing. He didn't speak the grand speeches he had prepared. He didn't offer the deep apologies. All the rhetoric of the boardroom vanished. "Hello, Aurora," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your dad." The baby blinked slowly, as if assessing his claim, then let out a tiny, soft sigh and settled against his chest. For the next hour, he simply held her. He rocked her slowly, focusing on the simple, overwhelming truth. This was the life he had thrown away. This was the unconditional love he had been too terrified to accept. Elias and Sarah watched in silence, observing the careful, gentle reverence in his movements. The hour passed in a blur. When Ms. Reed indicated the visit was over, Alex found his hands trembling again. He looked at Sarah, his eyes pleading not for her forgiveness, but for permission to remain connected. "I will see you next week, Sarah," he said, handing the baby back with extreme reluctance. Sarah met his gaze, her expression unyielding but not cruel. "Yes, you will." He left the center, knowing he was still a ruined man in the eyes of the world, but he carried a new, terrifying hope. He had a chance to earn his place, one precious hour at a time. X, earning the silence. A daily redemption. The routine of supervised visits became the anchor of Alex's existence. They were awkward, often silent, and emotionally draining. He wasn't allowed to ask Sarah about her life, about Elias, or about anything personal. He could only ask about Aurora. Is she sleeping well? Has she smiled yet? What are her favorite colors? He learned patience. He learned that being present meant focusing on the mundane, the precise angle to hold a bottle, the quiet dignity of a well-changed diaper, the soothing sound of his own low humming. He learned the difference between the small, tentative smiles of gas and the bright, wide-open recognition of joy. Sarah, observing him, saw not the arrogant magnate, but a man humbled by a love that demanded simplicity. She saw his consistency. He never once missed a visit, never once arrived late, and always came prepared, not with extravagant gifts, but with quiet attention. The most painful visits were the ones where Elias brought Aurora. Elias was never intrusive, always sitting back with a book, but his very presence was a constant reminder to Alex of the superior man who had stepped up when he had run. Alex swallowed the jealousy, knowing he had no right to it. Elias was the benchmark of the man he needed to become, reliable, gentle, and present. One afternoon, during a visit where Aurora was particularly fussy, Sarah stepped in. "Try walking with her," she suggested. A slow, gentle rhythm. Alex took Aurora and began to walk the small perimeter of the room. He walked past Sarah, past Ms. Reed, past the colorful toys. He walked the way he used to walk the perimeters of his enormous, empty boardroom. Only this time, he wasn't looking for threats or opportunities. He was just looking for a rhythm to soothe his daughter. He hummed a half-forgotten tune, the melody his mother used to sing, and slowly, Aurora settled. "What was that song?" Sarah asked, her voice softer than usual. "I don't know the words," Alex admitted. "It was my mother's." Sarah smiled faintly. "It's beautiful." It was the most natural, unguarded moment they had shared since the mediation. It was a bridge built not on words, but on shared history and shared parenthood. Alex realized that redemption was not a singular, dramatic act. It was the daily, quiet work of showing up and being reliable. He had once believed control was power. Now he knew commitment was power. Commitment to the messy, unpredictable, precious life he had once destroyed. The 6 months of supervised visits finally concluded. The last appointment was just Alex and Sarah, without Ms. Reed. "The terms have been met, Alex," Sarah stated, her voice quiet. "The judge will approve unsupervised visits starting next week. The trust is stable. You have honored the agreement." Alex nodded, holding Aurora. "Thank you, Sarah, for the chance. You earned it," she corrected him. "But I need to be clear. This is for Aurora. Our relationship remains fixed. There is no romantic future." "I know," Alex said honestly, "and I won't cross that boundary. My only goal is to be the father she deserves." He looked down at his daughter. Aurora, now 6 months old, looked up and gave him a bright, recognizing smile. He had lost his empire, his reputation, and his romantic future with the woman he loved. But as he walked out of the center that day, holding his daughter, Alex Thorne felt the quiet, profound weight of a new beginning. He was no longer running from his shame. He was walking, head held high, toward his responsibility. Can a man fully heal and redeem himself by dedicating his life to fatherhood, even if he can never regain the love he lost? If this story of true sacrifice and redemption moved you, share this video. Hit the like button and tell us in the comments. What simple act of commitment from Alex convinced Sarah he was truly changing? Subscribe to the channel and join us for the next chapter of Alex and Aurora's journey. 11. The Daughter's Rhythm. Nip Du Kokangai. With the termination of supervised visits, Alex's role shifted from a structured visitor to a fledgling co-parent. He rented a small, comfortable house in Brooklyn, deliberately choosing a location that was neither the intimidating grandeur of his past nor the isolated quiet of Sarah's home, but a neutral, accessible ground. His first unsupervised weekend with Aurora was a crash course in humility. He discovered that the weighted baby doll he had trained with did not fight being put down, did not suddenly require a new diaper the moment he settled her for a nap, and certainly did not possess the specific, high-pitched cry that meant, "Only mommy knows what I want." He called Sarah in a panic 3 hours into the first morning. "Sarah, I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong. I've checked everything. She's fed, dry, she won't stop crying." "Take a deep breath, Alex." Sarah's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Did you check her gums? She might be teething. Find the frozen teether in the blue pouch. If that fails, try the shush sound. Loud, low, like white noise." He followed her instructions mechanically. The frozen teether worked instantly. The shift from wailing to content silence was miraculous. "Thank you," he murmured, leaning against the kitchen counter, sweat on his brow. "I was about to call 911. "You'll figure it out, Alex," Sarah said. "But the first rule of co-parenting is, the emergency button is for medical emergencies only. You figure out the rest." That conversation set the tone for their new reality. Sarah was the unwavering source of knowledge and boundaries. Alex was the persistent, dedicated student. He began charting Aurora's routines meticulously. The exact angle required to hold her for burping, 10 degrees off-center. The precise time she needed to look at the ceiling fan before smiling, 45 seconds. And the specific lullaby that guaranteed sleep, a half-forgotten German folk tune. He learned that the relentless pursuit of information that had once made him a titan was now perfectly channeled into caring for one small, perfect human being. 12. The ghosts of the boardroom. While Alex was gaining ground in fatherhood, his world outside was still catching up. He had successfully pleaded guilty to the financial charges, cooperating fully as promised, avoiding prison time, but facing heavy fines and a public censure that obliterated his standing in the finance world. One afternoon, he received a phone call from an old acquaintance, a minor figure on the Thorn Global board. "Alex, I'm calling because Victor, his father, suffered a stroke last week. He's stable, but the board needs an emergency appointment for chairman. They want you back, Alex. Temporarily. Your cooperation with the SEC made you a symbol of accountability. They need the name, and you're the only one who can stabilize the stock." The offer was a tempting ghost of his past life. He could walk back into the boardroom, take his seat at the head of the table, and reclaim his power. He met Veronica Steele, the journalist who had broken the scandal, and received Joss's anonymous data, for a coffee to gauge the public temperature. "They want you back, Alex?" Veronica raised an eyebrow, noting his plain, non-designer sweater. "The market has a short memory for fraud, but a long memory for drama. They don't want the old Alex. They want the narrative of the redeemed hero to sell stock. They want the responsible father to manage their assets." Alex understood instantly. His redemption wasn't his own. It was a corporate branding tool. His quiet, painful progress was just currency. "I can't go back," Alex stated, the words firm. I promised myself and Sarah that I wouldn't let the shadow of my father control my life anymore. Going back is walking into his trap. He declined the offer, sending a clear message to the board. The CEO is dead. The father remains. 13. The long game of trust. The true measure of his change came not from the boardroom, but from Elias Sterling. 6 months after unsupervised visits began, Alex was picking up Aurora from Sarah's home when Elias answered the door. Sarah was late returning from a hospital meeting. "Sarah's running 15 minutes behind," Elias said, his presence filling the doorway with quiet authority. "Come in. Aurora just finished her bottle." The encounter was a landmine of potential tension. Alex was standing in the home Sarah shared with the man who was her rock, the man he knew was the better choice. "Thank you, Elias," Alex managed, walking into the living room. Aurora was in her playpen, kicking happily. Elias sat on the sofa, scrolling through his tablet. "Sarah asked me to give you the updated feed schedule. She changed her morning bottle slightly." As Elias handed him the schedule, Alex saw a moment of quiet opportunity. "I wanted to thank you, Elias, for stepping up for Sarah when I wasn't there, for being present for Aurora." Elias looked up, his expression unreadable. "I did what any decent man would do for someone he cares about. Sarah is extraordinary. She deserved better than what you gave her." "She did," Alex agreed immediately, swallowing the familiar bitterness. He didn't defend himself. He didn't deflect. "And I know that my actions cost me the right to ask for anything. But I want you to know that my commitment to Aurora is absolute. I will never do anything to disrupt the peace and stability you and Sarah have built for her." Elias studied him for a long moment, looking for the old arrogance, the old manipulation, finding only simple, stark sincerity. "I believe you, Alex," Elias finally said, a slight nod of respect. "If Sarah trusts you with our daughter, I will uphold that trust. But understand, you have to keep earning it, every single day." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a truce, a hard-won acknowledgement from the man who had the moral authority to judge him. What do you think was the most difficult instinct for Alex to overcome? The urge to run away when things got hard, or the temptation to reclaim his corporate power? 14. The fragility of love. The following Christmas, Alex spent a few hours at Sarah's house, a carefully planned, neutral co-parenting event. He was making cocoa, watching Aurora, now almost 18 months, stack blocks, when Sarah stepped out onto the porch to take a phone call. The call was brief, and when she returned, her face was ashen. "What's wrong, Sarah?" "That was my doctor," she whispered, her hands trembling. "I had a blood test last week. It's not confirmed, but I think I might be pregnant." The news hit Alex like a silent bomb. He knew immediately that it was Elias's child. The thought was painful, a sharp reminder of the life he was excluded from. But his first instinct was not jealousy. It was concern. "Are you okay? What do you need? I can call Elias now." "No!" Sarah cut him off sharply. "I don't know what I need, and I haven't told Elias yet. It's too much." She looked at Alex, her eyes wide and scared. "I can't go through that stress again, Alex. Not after everything with Aurora." In that moment, Alex saw not the strong, unyielding co-parent, but the frightened woman he had abandoned years ago. He realized that the greatest act of love wasn't grand gesture or sacrifice. It was simple, unwavering stability. He walked over to her, avoiding the impulse to touch her, respecting her boundary. "We'll handle this, Sarah. Whatever you decide, whatever happens, you have my word. You won't be alone. Aurora needs her mother well, and I will do whatever is necessary to ensure your peace and privacy. My commitment to your stability is absolute." He offered her not romance, but a partnership rooted in trust, born from the deepest failure. Final Q&A. If Sarah is truly pregnant, what is the most important role Alex can play to support her and Elias, without crossing the line. This journey of redemption is far from over. Share your predictions for Sarah and Alex in the comments. Hit like if you believe true change is possible, and subscribe for the next chapter.